Welcome back to the channel, another album reaction video, a review where I go over the latest albums in the hip-hop world, going through the album, breaking down every track, trying to figure out what the album's about, giving you guys my viewpoint on how I feel about the album as a rapper and producer myself and hip-hop fan for a very long time. Yeah, so today we're gonna do the new album from JPEGMAFIA, I Lay Down My Life For You. That's the name of the album. He dropped it August 1st, his most recent project. So before I break down this album, Hellcat is already out on all platforms. Go ahead and check out that track. The next track that I'll be dropping, this one's set for August 14th. This one's called Usain Bolt. Listen to Hellcat. Plenty more music to come right afterwards. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, like the video. That's gonna help a whole lot. Yeah, so JPEGMAFIA, I Lay Down My Life For You. New album from JPEGMAFIA, producer slash rapper from Baltimore, Maryland. So this is a producer slash rapper, very experimental, a little bit older. He's kind of been around for the last like 10 years as a professional artist, rapper slash producer. Before he got into being a professional musician, he was part of the military. He's a sampled bass producer that's very experimental. The way he would piece together his beats are very different from like what people are used to hearing from artists in the hip-hop world. That's kind of been his trademark over the years. Now he's known as the experimental producer. No one really makes music the way JPEGMAFIA does. He has a very unique style, very different. The way he produces his beats, especially, not so much his rapping. His rapping is far more generic in terms of comparing it to like the most popular rappers. His beat making is like what stands out and what's like super different. He displays that a lot throughout this album. I had to listen to a few tracks like a couple of times. He has that style where you have to sort of listen to the song like a couple of more times just to like figure it out, get a good idea of what's happening. It's not your typical hip-hop music. You listen to it once and then you kind of get it. A lot of JPEGMAFIA's music doesn't have replay value, in my opinion. It's sort of like you listen to it once and you're impressed by it, but then you might forget about it because the more generic sounded hip-hop music will kind of like take over. You pay more attention to that and then you kind of forget what JPEG did, but like not really at the same time. His music's good enough where you'll forget about it just because other artists are putting out songs, and then you'll come back around to it, and then maybe the second time you go through one of his albums you appreciate it a little bit more just because of how different sounded it is. And at the same time he does bring a level of skill that's not normal in today's hip-hop world. We're gonna get right into this one. I'm gonna play a few of the songs, a sneak peek, just a snippet of it, just to give you guys an idea of how this album sounds like. Then I'm gonna break down the album. I'm gonna give you guys my summarization about the album, talk about it a little bit. I got a rating, also JPEGMAFIA's I Lay Down My Life For You. So this one's called Vulgar Display of Power. Get out of your show. The only time I fuck with amateurs is in this porno. The next track I'll play, this one's called JPEG Ultra featuring Denzel Curry. Got a brand new Algo shit, Kuma, hanging from my neck to the teeth. Live and direct out the bitch pussy. This is boy Denzel. The next track I'll play, this one's Ex-Military. I might have broke your homegirl off, but you ain't gotta unfollow me. I got ex-friends, know my number and still turn on me. I'm her ex-man, but she pretends she never heard of me. Alright, now I'll play one more song. This one's New Black History featuring Vince Staples.
When I come around, better stare at the floor. Cause I'm in that mode. On my own, I got that flavor. Jonathan Major paper. Especially when y'all catching up with PDFs and rappers, no drizzle.
Alright man, so JPEGMAFIA, I Lay Down My Life For You 2024 album. Just a few things to say about this one. I think it's generally a pretty good album. Been a pretty good year for hip-hop, and JPEG is continuing that trend with this album. I think most people look at this album as one of JPEG's best albums. I think a lot of people look at this album as a really high-level album, a really strong album. After I gave it a listen, I kind of agree and I kind of disagree. I think the album is good for the most part. I'll say the good stuff first. So I think the album is good. JPEG is a strong artist. I think he's one of the better producers in the game right now. Probably one of the best producers in history. The attention that he's generated, I think, is pretty incredible, because producers that make experimental style beats usually don't make it too far. Most rappers that are at the highest level in the game are gonna want more generic style beats so that it's easier to sell, because I always think that generic music is always gonna be easier to sell over experimental music. It's just how it is in the music industry. It's just cool to see how famous JPEGMAFIA has become off of making beats the way he makes them. Super experimental beats. It's cool to see how far it took him, basically, right? I feel the same way with this album, because he's mainly himself on this album. Typical strange experimental style beats that you're used to hearing from him. He goes full out with that throughout this album. After saying that, I do think the production on the album is very strong. There's a lot of beats that are very experimental, and it can kind of get hard to listen to at some points, but for the most part, the majority of the album has really well made production on it. Just like I was saying, I think JPEGMAFIA is one of the better producers in today's game, and maybe even in history. He displays that very well on this album. I think the rapping was pretty good for an artist that I think is not the best at rapping, because honestly, I never thought JPEG was that good of a rapper. I always thought he was just alright. It's kind of like Kanye West in a way. The fact that Kanye West, when it comes to beat making, Kanye West is like the GOAT, top 5, but when it comes to rapping, he doesn't really, I won't say that he doesn't take it as serious, but it's definitely not on the same level. Very rarely you'll hear Kanye West out rap his beats. It's usually his beats are the highlight of the song, and then his raps come afterwards. I feel the same way with JPEGMAFIA. I think his beats come first, and then his rapping is always not as good as the beats, and I felt like that throughout this whole album. And I don't know if it's because he puts more attention on his production over his raps. That could be the case. You have to get the sense that most producers do that. The best producers in the world that also rap on their beats, they probably put more attention on the production rather than the rapping. In most cases, they'll get other rappers to be featured on the album to do the rapping, so then they'll just get other rappers to be featured on the album. After saying that, I always thought JPEG was a pretty bad rapper. I think he did pretty good on this album. I think he did a pretty good job than what you normally hear from JPEG. He's not a bad rapper, but most of the time, I think it's just like he'll use a flow that you've maybe heard from another rapper, and then it's basically his lyrics that make it different. But I mean, on this album, there's a few lines on here that I thought was pretty crazy, you know what I mean? For a guy like JPEG who's not that good at rapping, he displayed some rap skills on here. He had some lines that are definitely memorable on this one. I felt like he tried a little bit harder on the rapping side. I like how he incorporates like live instruments on his beats. You can hear the guitars and a lot of the drums throughout the album, and I don't know if it's him playing the instruments or he got maybe actual drummer and actual guitarist to play it. What he played the music that he wrote, and then he puts everything together at the end. It could be like that. It'd be very impressive if he was the one that was doing the drumming and playing the guitar notes and all that. I do enjoy live instruments in beats. That's another part of the album that I really enjoyed. The feature list is decent too. It would have been cool if you got a little more features. Denzel Curry, Vince Staples, and an artist named Buzzy Lee. Not too sure who that is. I think the features were picked proper. It would have been a little bit cooler if he could maybe get a guy like Kanye West featured on here. Playboy Cardi would have been cool too. Danny Brown would have been sick. Those are like the main reasons why I did enjoy the album. Another thing too, I think just the album as a whole, well put together album. It's almost like a novel or like a book or like a movie in a sense. Every song is like a different scene. The way he put together the album as a whole, I think, was done very well. A lot of rappers will put albums out and it will sound more like a mixtape than an album, just a bunch of songs slapped together kind of. JPEG didn't do that. He actually made like a real album. Now, the things that I didn't like about it, the only thing about JPEG, I do enjoy his like style of beat making, how different it is, how distinctive he'll make his beats, but at times he'll get too extreme with it and it'll just be so experimental that it's like difficult to listen to the music in in a sense. I sort of felt like that with this album. I think he gets a little too experimental with some of the beats. It just becomes hard to listen to. This is how I feel with a lot of the songs that he's made in the past. Not too many of those songs on this album. I think most of the songs are pretty like easy to listen to, but there's a few of them where it's like so experimental where it's just like it's hard to follow this, you know what I mean? It makes me want to like switch the track. That's one bad thing about the album. I think there's a little bit too much rock influence in it. I mean, that's kind of a dumb thing to say. Whenever you involve other genres with hip-hop and you're making like an album and you want to put like R&B, you want to put punk, you want to put classical, whatever it is, you want to mesh it with the hip-hop, it's never a bad idea to do that. But I think the rock influence was just a little too much on this one, and it kind of took away the fact that it's supposed to be a hip-hop album. I think it's just a little too much, and I think it ruined the album just a bit. It doesn't give you the sense that, okay, maybe this is a rock album, you know, like it doesn't do that. I think he just used too much electric guitar in this one, man. It takes away the hip-hopness of the album. JPEG is rapping a lot on the album. He's not singing on it, so it just kind of throws me off just a bit. I might just be like a me thing. Maybe more people will enjoy that aspect of the album, but I think there's just a little too much electric guitar influence throughout the beats on here, and it just, I don't know. And it's like, I like rock music. I just think that he didn't have to use as much electric guitar on this one as he did, and I think the album could have been a little bit better. Another thing too, his rapping. I did say that I thought he did a better job at rapping on this album than most projects or most songs that he's been on before, but the only thing with the rapping on this one, I think he did a pretty good job. I just don't like how he always talks about kind of like the same thing, sort of. He always talks about the stuff that bothers him. I just don't like how he talks about like the same thing over and over again in media, in society in general. It's like a smart way of songwriting, right? Talking about things that move you emotionally. But I think he just, I don't know, man. It's like the same thing almost. Like he's always talking about people hated on him, but then he's a bigger artist, more famous artist, or more famous person than that person hated on him, just talking smack on the internet or something like that. And he just kind of like points out those people, and it's like, oh, you're a nobody on the computer. Now I'm famous because of my music. And a lot of like trying to bully the bully in a sense, right? It's like all these critics basically bullying JPEG for being the type of rapper he is. It's kind of him bullying back in a sense. Like that's kind of what I get from his rapping, at least in this album. Whenever he's rapping, it's basically that. That's another thing I don't really like about it. And I always, like I said before, I always thought JPEGMAFIA was a bad rapper, man. Just like Kanye West, the same thing, being incredible producer, but his rapping never matches that. That's kind of how I always felt about JPEGMAFIA. More features would have been better. The beats are changing. Every beat is completely different, but he kind of sticks with that same flow that like, you know what I mean? He's rapping like that the entire way. So besides everything I said good and bad about the album, I do think that it's a pretty good album just because of how fresh the sound is. Whenever music is different, you know what I mean? I'm always gonna like that part about the music. JPEG, he's putting you through a new experience every time with his strange and odd style of producing and songwriting. For that reason, I did enjoy the album. I like how JPEG kind of stays who he is. He stays true to who he is instead of copying the biggest rapper in the world. As a rating, I'm gonna give this album an 8.2 out of 10. Put in other genres into it, a lot of electronic and a lot of rock elements that he meshes in with the album. I think him doing that is cool, but it takes away the hip-hopness of the album. The rock influence and the electronic influence kind of took away the hip-hopness of the album, and I can see a lot of hip-hop fans being disappointed because of that. But yeah, 8.2. JPEGMAFIA's I Laid Down My Life For You, his 2024 album. Comment, let me know what you guys think. More music, more content on the way. Thank you guys for watching. That's it for today's video. I'm Looper Norris. I'm out of here. Peace.